observing myself and others in this crazy political climate is very interesting. And what I notice with myself as well as with others is that it's 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 a time of crisis. It seems like it's extremely critical, or a sense of urgency. We all have a sense of urgency. And the interesting thing about having a sense of urgency is we tend to get really excited and pumped up about doing things. And so when we get that way, and if our candidate happens to win, we're excited and we're joyful and we're happy. But if our candidate does not win or drops out of the race, we have to really be clear about how we're going to manage that disappointment, or even to the degree that some people have anger. They might even have this grievance that they feel like they're not being represented, or they're not being cared for. And so that energy, that anger, that frustration can can be expressed in ways that are not helpful. Just going back to 2016, when there were a lot of voters whose candidate didn't get in, they didn't even vote for the party that they belonged to. They just voted against it in spite or whatever. But there was so much anger, they weren't able to heal in between the primary and the general election. And so this year, if the will of the people is happens to be, how do we change things? How do we get the government back to working for and of and by the people? And how do we get back to a sense of dignity and grace and inclusion? That we have to realize that even though our client didn't win, that we still have to think about the big picture, and we have to put self aside. At least this is what I have to do, or what I would do, is just on the idea of getting back to normal, level of normalcy, or getting to the point where we feel like the government represents us, and that we don't feel like we're not being cared for or even listened to. And so we have to think about the big picture. So for me, if I have a candidate that dropped out, let's say like Elizabeth Warren, and I decide to back the candidate that's winning, or candidate that becomes the ultimate candidate, I have to be able to let go of my frustration, my anger, and just focus on how I could be helpful, and actually think, forgetting about myself, to help things or help people for the greater good. So I just feel like if I get stuck in my anger and I just cut off my nose to spite my face, where I won't vote for anybody or vote for the opposite candidate because my candidate didn't get in, or if I'm angry and I can't even think about voting for somebody else, or I refuse to vote for another candidate, then that has to be there has to be understanding what the consequence of that is. Consequence of me not voting Democratic, if I'm a Democratic voter, because my candidate didn't win, it's not helping the party in which I'm supposed to be a part of. So we have to be able to heal, and I think that's the biggest challenge for this country right now, is how do we heal? How do we move forward, and how do we turn the page and get back on track, get back in alignment with the Constitution and the rule of law, and our basic goodness, our values that determine who we are as Americans, like pursuit of happiness and religious freedom, as well as whatever our sex or our religion or whatever political party we belong to. There has to be an ability to let everyone be who they are. Thinking of survival mode in terms of politics, when we're in survival mode, there's no space between stimulus and response, and we're actually in the reptilian brain, which is fight, flight, freeze, forage for food, reproduce, and so there's no thinking brain involvement. It's just it's on an animal level, and so it's survival, and it's like the survival of the fittest. And so everyone's the enemy, and if there's the enemy, you got to destroy them or wipe them out, and there's no space there to make room for for tolerance. And so when we're in survival mode, we're just trying to protect ourselves. We're just trying to, because we feel like we're threatened, and we have to eliminate the threat. And the threat could be the other person, the other party. And that could be devastating. That could have devastating impact. That could lead to some folks actually going into a situation and just shooting everybody. You see these mass shootings, or it could be just be hating and attacks on the internet. Just really, but it's harmful. It harms ourselves and others. And so when we're in survival mode, we're not thinking about growth mode. You can't be in survival mode and growth mode at the same time. So that means you're primed for fight, flight, or freeze. So either you're going to fight, or you're going to flee and just kind of not even be engaged, or you're going to freeze and where there's no movement, or you just become paralyzed with fear or indifference. Sometimes I have to turn off the TV and don't listen to what's on TV, especially when people are not being truthful and they're being hostile and they're not letting the other person talk, or they get in there and they're justifying bad behavior and just minimizing or having alternative facts. It drives me crazy and it's frustrating. But at the same time, what's helpful for me is to see that person is in survival mode and they're not able to see clearly, or they have an alternative view of facts because it's colored by a hindrance or one of our negative emotions. And when we're coming from fear, we're going to make choices that are going to lead to suffering for ourselves or others. And we're not going to see clearly what's going on and be able to adapt to what is really happening in this moment versus us projecting or interpreting or spinning reality in a way. And we know from experience, for psychological well-being, we have to start from the truth. Know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. And it's this idea of being with things as they are, and we can see things as they are, then we can accept it. So right now, there's some people out there that are saying, because of political reasons, that this coronavirus is a hoax. And as a result of that, if they believe that, they're not going to take precautions. And not only will they get infected, but they're going to infect all those around them because they don't believe that it's real. And so there's some things you could spin, but the coronavirus is not something you can spin. You can't spin it. It's real and people are dying from it, and we have to be sensitive to it so that we don't infect other people. And so that's just one of the areas where we're so identified with a political party or point of view that we're not willing to be with reality of the situation, and it causes harm. In this case, the harm is immediate, especially if you're elderly or you have a pre-existing condition like myself. Someone that doesn't believe that there's a virus, they could be spreading it and it could lead to my death. What helps me is to get beyond the illusion of separateness and realize that I and the other are one, and that it's better together. And that when I look at someone who may not look like me or think like me, that they too are a masterpiece, or they have the divine spark. And the challenge is how do I relate to them in a way where I see them as just like me. They want to be happy, and they're suffering when they're coming from fear or ignorance, or wanting something like wanting something so badly that if they don't get it, they want to just destroy everything.